Shoemaker comes to that conclusion that everything is happening in the north. But is he alone? No, he's not. Look and see the wealth of material. Wait till you see the people he uses to support what he says.
Who are these scholars that, let's say, were influencers in the field of historical criticism of Islam, and what were their conclusions?
Yeah, and it's important that we do this because this is exactly what Shoemaker does. And we've said this over and over again. One of the lovely things about his book is that he doesn't sit there and say, I claim, I believe, this is my experience. No, he's not, because he doesn't have the acumen, he doesn't have the wherewithal, he doesn't have the background, nor did he have the time to go and do all this research. He's taken the research from those who have spent their whole careers. People who know the languages, people like Hoyland, who knows 18 languages, people like Patricia Krone, who knows 15 languages. They're the linguists who have gone back and actually read the documents, the original documents. None of us are able to do. I'm not capable, you're not capable. That's why we need to stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before. So almost everything that Shoemaker claims, he supports with this scholarship, with this academia. So let's look at some of the quotes that he does, and let's bring in some of these scholars that he's talking about. And let's talk about, first of all, the two that I'm going to bring up are Montgomery and Mount. This is what Montgomery has to say. And he talks about the fact that the Hijaz is just way too isolated for the Quran to have come from there. And this is what he says. The central Hijaz in the 7th century does not fit very well with the production of a text like the Quran. Tribal states of the Hijaz appeared to have been non-literate, as well as culturally insulated. And there is no evidence of any sufficient cultural contact between the peoples and civilizations of this region, that's the Hijaz, and the broader worlds of the Mediterranean, late antiquity, and Sasanian Iran, which you need to if you're going to make sense of this book called the Quran, because it's obvious that there's lots of interaction, cultural and theological, happening in this book. Munt also makes the same theme, but he talks more about Mecca and Yathrib, that they were nothing more than small oases at this time, just insignificant. And this is what Munt says. Mecca and Yathrib were some maybe 700 to 1,000 kilometers distant from even the borderlands of a cultural area, separated by a vast and punishing desert. Both settlements had very small populations and possessed limited economic significance, providing little occasion or encouragement for broader contact and cultural integration with this region. Yathrib, which later became Medina, in the pre-Islamic period was not even a town, but little more than a small oasis comprising a somewhat looser collection of disparate settlements focused on the cultivation of dates.
Which is still to this day, by the way.
Oh, is that so? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been to Yathrib. You've been
the
to Medina.
Medinan dates are known. I mean, very well known.
Yeah, and much more today than back in the 7th century. Why? Because now it only had a limited amount of water. Today, now, with all the desalination plants, there are over 2 million people living in Medina today, but not back then, not just a few hundred. So that he goes on to say, so that it is hard to imagine that these caravans had any business there beyond perhaps acquiring some basic provisions before moving on to the next stop. So there you see two different scholars are very clear. There's nothing significant. They're not even mentioning Mecca, you notice. They're just talking about Yathrib. Why? Because there is no reference to Mecca in any of this material. Let's go to Patricia Krone herself, because she is by far the kingpin in this whole revisionist view. She is the one that's written about Mecca. She wrote an entire book on Mecca, looking and demanding and asking the same question. She really took on Montgomery walked on his whole trade route theory that I grew up with. I always heard about the trade route theory. That's why Mecca got its importance. And she shut that down with that book written in 1987, got a death threat from Muslims for writing that book, had to change her institution from Oxford to Cambridge because of that death threat. And that's why you have to pay attention when she speaks, because she has put her life on the line for her research.
Right.
Now, what does she say? Well, she says very clearly that the trade dwindled from Yathrib once the sea route was opened up. Although she actually even shuts that down because she says the sea route became important by the second century. Second century, everything went by maritime for the same reason we go maritime today. It's the cheapest way to go.
That's right.
If you're going maritime, you don't have to worry about...
Cheapest and fastest.
It's the fastest. All you have is wind to blow your sails. You don't have to worry about dacoits or thieves that are hiding behind sand dunes or rocks. You don't have to feed camels. You don't have to water them. You just really, everything is as cheap as you can get. And
Exactly.
That's why we still do it even today.
And the quickest way to deliver the merchandise as well.
And you can see for miles ahead of you if there's any ship that's going to attack you. You can be well prepared. You can't do that when you're on land. And she even made that statement that if you take a ton of goods and just go 50 miles by land, just 50 miles, it costs the same amount as 1,250 miles by sea.
There you go.
Obviously, it's the cheapest. So that's why she shut down any notion that anything went through a place called Mecca. And she says this: once trade from South Arabia switched to sea transit, when she's talking about South Arabia, she's talking about Aden. Aden on the Arabian Sea.
That's right.
So switched to sea transit around the 1st century. So I was wrong. I said second. It's actually 1st century. It is hard to believe that any overland route that may have passed through Yathrib survived this competition for long. Notice she doesn't use Mecca there. No one's talking about Mecca. Only Yathrib, because Yathrib is referred to. We have references to it. Taif is referred to. We have reference for it. Najran, Sana, Aden, these are all referred to. We have references for those towns. They're all oases along the Western Plateau. No reference to Mecca.
And she researched that herself.
And we're just talking about Yathrib now, okay? So that's Patricia Crone. What about Hawting and Wansboro? Now, you can't get bigger names than that. Wansboro is the father of revisionism. Hawting is the one that did his book there on the 1st century of Islam. So he has gone back to that century, back to the 7th to the 8th century, from 622 up to 719. AD, and he says, let's look and see what we see there. So you have to trust him. That's why Shoemaker quotes him. And he says very clearly, both Hawting and Wansboro, both of them are very clear, there were no Jews that far south. So this is what he says. Ironically, the Jewish community of Yathrib is never mentioned even once in any Jewish source from antiquity, or any source outside the Islamic traditions for that matter. The Jews of late ancient Rome and Mesopotamia thus seem to have been completely unaware even of this community's existence. There is no reference. Hawting goes on to say there is not one reference of any Jews from a place called Yathrib, let alone let alone Mecca, because for one very good reason. Just look at a map and you can see why.
So they were north.
They were where the trade was.
Yes.
They were where the cities were. They were where the commerce was. You go where the commerce is. You don't go to a hamlet of a few hundred where there's nothing happening.
Right.
So that's why there are no Jews that far south. Yet when you look at the traditions, you have 3 complete big tribes there. Banu Qurayza, the Banu Nadir, the Banu Kainuka tribe. These are huge tribes that have been there for hundreds of years, and they dominated the trade. That's why Muhammad had to go there to arbitrate between them and the Ansar. If that was the case, they have been there. They outnumbered. One of the fellows that came on your program, I'm not going to say what his name was. He quoted 10 to 12,000 Jews living in Yathrib at this time.
He's relying on the standard Islamic narrative.
And I sat there and I went, I would love to ask him where he got that source from. Well, it's obviously he's going to standard Islamic narrative. Right. So you can't do it both ways. You can't do it out of 2 years. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth. You've got to either go with where the evidence is, or you're going to sit and listen to the standard Islamic narrative. If you want to go with the SIN, go with the SIN, but you're going to die with sin. And therefore, let's make sure we don't die with sin. Let's keep to our goals, and let's keep to what the rocks say. And if we're not going to cry out, the rocks will cry out for us. So that's Hawting and Wansboro. Let's go to Hoyland, because Hoyland is the one that really does, he is the mother lode of what's happening in the 7th century. Now, he says very clearly that Jews are either in the north or they're in the south. And you've said this many times. I've heard you quote this. The Jews are only in the north, they're only in the south, because that's where the water is. That's where the cities are. That's where the people are. You only have Jews where there are people. The same way with Christians. You only have the discussion where there are Jews and Christians. So let's quote him.
And we have extra Islamic sources that confirm their presence south and north as well.
Yeah. So he says this: the only Jewish material that we can find are a few inscriptions from the broader region that confirms some degree of Jewish presence, although these are all from the far north of the Hijaz, that is from Tabuk and further north, or the Gulf of Aqaba and further north, or South Arabia, which would be Yemen today, and Oman. That area was called the Hadramaut at that time.
Right, Hadramaut, and still called Hadramaut today.
So you can see Hoyland is very clear. Wansboro, Hawting, Hoyland, Crone, Munt, And everyone in Montgomery, every one of these are very clear that there are no Jews. There is just nothing happening in the Hijaz. So Shoemaker comes to this conclusion, and he talks about the seafarers, and he says the absence of Christianity from the Hijaz also affords yet another telling sign of the region's disconnects from the surrounding cultures. What's more, there are fundamental problems in reconciling the environmental conditions implied by parts of the Quran with the barren and inland location of Mecca and Yathrib. Its frequent references to seafaring and farming suggest a very different context.
Wonderful. Next time, you said we are going to at least put the spotlight again on a surprising conclusion by Shoemaker?
Absolutely. I'm going to sit there and I hope he was watching. I want to see what Shoemaker does, because I'm going to ask him a specific question. If this is what you believe, if this is what you're saying, if these are all what the quotes are saying, then why in the world did you come to the conclusion you came to?
Yeah, and I would love really to extend an invitation to Dr. Shoemaker maybe to join us on a live stream if he is willing to do so. So maybe he can share the rationale behind any of his conclusions.
But we haven't said what that is yet.
Right. What I'm saying is,
you're going to have to wait till
it will be good
next
to have him, hopefully in the future, to interact with us about these conclusions that we've been sharing, and we will be sharing as well in the next episode. So thank you as always. Thank you, everyone. This is Al Fadi. God bless you. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.